Good morning. I wanted to cover the first two chapters that will be part of our next exam. That test will be available to you November 4th and for the few days after that. I'm just going to begin. So if we come to our homepage on Western Online, and if we go past the messages and come down to the content browser, the test will begin with this chapter, graphic design and sculpture. While it loads in, let me just mention the test. A couple of people still have not taken it. Contact me, please. I'm going to work with you. These are strange times. So if you contact me, we can make arrangements for you to take the exam still. As a whole, the class did well. I did botch one question for some reason. One image did not load. That was question 29. And I've given credit to everyone on that question. Congratulations. So graphic design. Graphic design is all around us, from automobiles to furniture to clothing, advertising, objects that you buy, etc. And if we look at its history, one of the significant events is the invention of movable type. That was invented 1,000 years ago in China. That's a test question. And it comes to the West, and it really has great impact for the world. In the 1500s, with the printing revolution begun by Johann Gutenberg. This allows, movable type allows books to be printed quickly, to be distributed, and knowledge, of course, now is spread more rapidly. This is the first book they printed. This is the Gutenberg Bible. A couple weeks ago, I visited a manuscript museum in Rock Island, and there it was. This is the most valuable book in the world. There's some 30 copies, and I couldn't believe that I saw it in the Quad Cities just a few weeks ago. This changed the world. Typography is, these terms are applicable to the text you use when you type, anytime you use the computer. We have terms, and I will not include these on the test, but at least have some awareness of the differentiation of types is on the different height of the descenders, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We have two categories of text, serif and sans serif. Sans serif does not have the little tails, I guess we could say, that we find, like, for example, in newspaper copy. This is more for headlines and impact. Kerning is the spacing, there's leading. That's a very old term that goes back to typeface. I'm sorry, wait, when I say typeface, that is the correct term. A font actually is a particular typeface of a particular size, weight, color, etc. Some of the typefaces are hundreds of years old. Garamond, for example, goes back to 1500s or shortly after that. Helvetica from the 1950s, and they are continually redesigned and made available to us. What I do want you to take in consideration as a test question, that we speak of typography, that design in many ways is a combination of images and words. And the words communicate to us within a design on the really three levels. First, the meaning of the word itself, the visual impact within the design, and then the context, how the word is used in combination with an image, or its relative size or placement, etc. And as we come back to this sort of admonishment that if copy or words are meant to be read and they're hard to read, that is a badly designed composition. And the designer needs to think of type as integrating, not added in addition to the overall composition. Increasingly, we're seeing graphic symbols, symbols that can communicate regardless of a person's primary language. So if you come to, let's say, an airport, we have these images that communicate in a way that written languages or spoken languages can't, or not as easily. I'm going to show some posters from the First World War and think about what the artist is trying to communicate with the words, the placement of the words, the colors chosen, the images used in combination. And we can see that it's not just the subject matter, it's what the artist or designer is trying to communicate through that subject matter. So if we look at this first one has sort of tugging on the heartstrings, very different message from the second poster. Here we have this brute of an enemy with a bloody knife even. This is even different from this image, which has a patriotic sort of appeal. We have this Boy Scout or Cub Scout being handed so the weaponry of, like the next generation. This is their responsibilities, the things they will need to shoulder. Very different from this poster. It has a very different appeal and a very different intent. Look how the women are presented differently between this and this poster. Here we have that sense of we're all in this together. Everyone is contributing. Here's an image that we're familiar with. It comes from the First World War. It was adapted and used in the Second, and it's an image that is parodied and still used today. This image comes from another image from the First World War. This is Lord Kirchner. He's a British, he's in the British military. We have this very direct appeal. He's pointing to you. The word you is emphasized. There is no ducking your responsibility. And if this is an English poster, here's another one. This one is basically saying that the soldiers in the First World War, at that time, the contemporary world, they are a continuation of soldiers from centuries before. They're fighting different enemies. But you are a part of this sort of mythology of a nation. This is a German poster. And if we had changed the word to English, in many ways, it has the same message as some of the posters we've seen. This is a very different German poster. This is Germania, and this is a very aggressive and a very, we almost could not have a different personification of the nation between these two posters. The last one that I was jumping ahead to, this is from Russia, and this is the Tsarist Russia. This is before, in fact, during the First World War, that's when the communist revolution comes. This is when imagery from Russia looks very different. If you try to think about the difference of these administrations, how they would use then different imagery. Look at there, we have the same knight, don't we? Sort of the St. George that we've had was used previously by the English. I just saw that. I also want to cover sculptural techniques. There's 4 that we'll focus on. We have carving, which is subtractive process. And then there are three additive processes: modeling, assembly, and casting. And I'll give examples of each. So if we look at this first image, this artist, or this group of artists, and Michelangelo used the same technique. They started with a larger stone and cut away everything that wasn't, in this case, that wasn't Moses. Obviously, we have a refinement of technique with Michelangelo's sculpture. This, by the way, is a huge sculpture. I think people come up to about here. So Michelangelo, who's not a large man, he was about 5 feet in height, carved this by himself about 500 years ago. If we look at this image, we have a different process for creating a sculpture. Here the artist is adding clay and then shaping it. We have a different additive process. This is welded assembly of adding, and if I go down here, for example, this is also example of an assembly sculpture. You know, we have adding the nose, the culp, the hat, the stick arms, etc. Casting is where you create an original image. A cast is put around it. The original image is removed and replaced with different, sometimes metals are poured in or whatever, so the cast is taken apart, and then the replica is now the cast sculpture. And a cast allows for multiples. Once you have a cast created, you can use it and create sculptures again and again and again. These are just some contemporary examples of sculptures. This is a large building in Germany that was wrapped. The artist, Crystal, and his wife, I went to dinner with them. They invited me to a dinner at the governor's mansion, and we had a wonderful conversation. This is sculpture in the sense that the projection is on a three-dimensional form. I've worked with projections. I worked with NASA and some 100-foot long projections. It was a lot of fun. Expensive. That's one thing about projections. If you've been to Disney World and you've seen the projections on the Disney castle, it is sort of jaw-dropping and cost millions of dollars. I was interrupted, so I'm going to continue. We'll start with, in the second half here, with Paleolithic, Neolithic, and then some of the early artwork created in civilizations such as Egypt and Mesopotamia, China, and the New World. But we'll focus on Egyptian art. When we speak about the Stone Age, there are different, there's Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic, etc. We'll focus on two. The word lithic means stone, so this is Old Stone Age, Neo, the New Stone Age. And one thing to keep in mind, these people are really no different from us. They're as intelligent as us, they look like us, and they simply didn't have the technology and the world of information to build on that we take for granted. I'm going to briefly speak of this cognitive revolution at the end, but as we speak of these two different time frames, Paleolithic art is cave painting, and we can characterize it as art used to gain control over a dangerous world. Neolithic art is the agricultural revolution, when people went from being hunter-gatherers to building cities. And we'll find artists less naturalistic. Paleolithic art, the date keeps getting pushed back, which is really exciting. This cave, discovered about 25 years ago, when they dated the materials used to paint these images, This is pigments mixed with like animal fats. Um, Astonishingly, the carbon dating indicated there's some 30,000 years old. So these images were not painted at once. They were painted over a period of time, drawn or painted. And if we look at this image, we see these images are very large and inaccessible places. These are deep within the cave, deep within the cave. These would have to be painted with artificial lighting. These are, again, the circumstances, the scale of the work, the inaccessibility. These are really extraordinary works of art by people, again, really not much different from us. The Neolithic Revolution comes after agriculture and the domestication of animals. And we see now art is, at least the art that is still with us, takes on a different sort of meaning, at least a different form. If we look at Stonehenge, which should be maybe the best surviving example, it was created over a span of 1,000 years. So this is a very purposeful structure. These stones, which are huge, and we're about this height. These stones were quarried and carried hundreds of miles to be put into these formations. I followed this with material from our textbook. What I'm speaking about here is what will be emphasized. I think this is fascinating. This is a different way to look at history, not just through sort of the lens of wars and leaders, but the cultural changes and brought about, or at least reflected by the arts. Good stuff, do read it. We speak about the, let me see. I don't know why some of it is buried here, but you click on it, you can read it readily. Nefertiti. Anyway, if you look at this object, I've seen it in person. It's in the British Museum. It's not very large, about 2-3 feet in height. And we have an artwork that is about 5,000 years old. And this was, we look at the symbolism, the imagery, it is strikingly similar to this image, which is created some 1,800 years later. I mean, that is the same distance in time from us to Jesus. So even though we have this cultural sort of similarity, really a tremendous amount of time has passed between the creation of this and this. We have this early form of sort of picture writing. We have these sort of stylized imagery. You know, people did not walk like this. They didn't walk like an Egyptian. This is the way to represent that this is a king. So this would be a pose that would be recognizable. This figure really is not smaller. I mean, it is smaller. It's not further away. We can tell this figure is not further away. She's just simply less important. That's part of this symbolism. So if we see this figure standing here, he's not further away. He's less important than the king. And he's holding the king's shoes, which will represent that this person this is symbolic. This is not an actual event. We see that same face, so we have different representations of the king. This is King Tut. This object was never meant to be seen by the population. It was created and buried with them as a means to, in effect, assist him after physical death. That belief in life after physical death, you will find that also in medieval art and Christian art. And there will be a certain similarity between ancient Egyptian and medieval art, at least in this regard. Their artwork is symbolic in both. If we look at the pyramids, and look at the height, I mean, that is astonishing. This structure was originally covered in limestone, and it must have been extraordinary when seen when first created. So this is after 4,500 years of wear, and this material was stolen. This is very near the largest city in Egypt, and the stones were stolen from it and used in the city. So if we look at an object such as this, it's sort of surprising to realize this was built for really for the king, buried within it, the king and queen. There'd be a chamber within these. These are tombs. These are tombs to assist, in effect, in their life after physical death. I just have some images as we go around the world, and we find that desire to sort of have human-made mountains, and they have a spiritual quality. This is a great ziggurat that is from present-day Iraq. This is largely reconstruction. This was built of less durable materials, and up here would have been a temple. The first emperor of China, much later time, this is more than 2,000 years later, his tomb was discovered in your lifetime, and they still have not excavated it. They are working, I guess, toward excavating the tomb. And in these pits around it have been discovered these armies of sort of clay or terracotta figures, thousands of figures built in effect to assist the king in his afterlife. What's fascinating about these soldiers, each is individual. Each is a depiction of a different person. There are horses and other, not just soldiers. There's acrobats and other people sort of included in this, these life-size figures. In fact, one of the thoughts is up until this, there's no life-size naturalistic figures in Chinese art history. And it's thought that these were instructed, in effect, by Greek artists of that time frame. I did see these figures, several of them at least, in Chicago. They were brought to the Field Museum, and to see them in person is so different, such a different experience than seeing them just in a slide like this. I really encourage you, as you go forward in your life, to go to museums, to visit these sites. It is it can be a life-changing experience. If we look in our hemisphere, we find, again, much later time frame, we have, again, these human-made structures, these pyramids. In many ways, this is more like the ziggurat with the temple at the top. This is, in effect, in, well, I'll tell you what, these are the Mayans. The Mayans are gone. The Mayan civilization ended before Europeans came. What happened to the Mayans? They're still with us. Their civilization. And this one here, very close to us, near St. Louis. This is a city of Cahokia, across from, we can car and drive down there, right? These were constructed some, let's say 1,000 years ago. The population of this community was estimated to be as large as 40,000. No city in North America would exceed that for several hundred years. There's some 80 of these earthen mounds, and the word is earthen because they're earthen. They simply weren't made of the durable materials. So we have, in effect, just a remnant of what was there initially. I'm just going to end with a few terms that you may have seen: BP, BCE, etc. This is basically ways to record the passage of time. So a lot of times we think of BC or AD. AD is Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord. So year one would be recorded differently by different calendars. BC would be, in effect, it's numbered backwards. The pyramids, for example, are 2,500 years BC, before Christ. And sometimes we have this designation instead before the Common Era. This is referring to the same time frame. I've seen this less frequently, but it is, again, I find it fascinating with the different calendars and how we, in effect, record, think of the passage of time. Some of the terminology, the cognitive revolution, agricultural revolution, and then later the scientific revolution, came from a book I read maybe a year and a half ago called Sapiens. And the author basically tells the sweep of the human story. And he speaks of that, that with the development of language, that abstract thoughts, religion can be now communicated, and it would change in the way that we interacted. Agricultural revolution, I think also an interesting point he made is this is the beginning of the division of labor, where most people are at the bottom of this pyramid of leadership at the top. And so we have in many ways a society that has advantages and disadvantages. The scientific revolution begins about 500 years ago. And this is when humankind admits ignorance. A map would show that we don't know. People would get in ships and find out what is here or there. And initially, obviously, there were mistakes made, but in many ways, that's the path of science, is to improve on knowledge and to sort of imagine what this world really is. This is the world we know. And, but I think it's interesting to characterize it as that we admit ignorance. So for example, in the medieval time period, before the Renaissance, if someone had a question, they would ask a priest. And if that priest didn't know the answer, he'd say, well, that doesn't matter. Or the answer that was given would be directly from the Bible. So facts they descended. These were, written in stone, literally written in stone with the 10 Commandments. And now we have this ever sort of evolving idea of what truth is. And it's one, as a person questions it, then they prove the next step and go forward. So we have a very different sense of truth, I think, today than people who lived 1,000 years ago or 4,000 years ago, etc. So again, as we look at art, think of it how it tells the human story. Things change as our understandings of the world change. So thank you much. I'm going to speak to you, I guess, in, let me say 2 weeks, and I'll have a sort of similar overview of the material. Again, please contact me with questions. We will not meet again. Like I said, when I met on Wednesday, no one showed. And that's fine. In many ways, that was the smart decision. We live in strange times, but it feels now that as a class, and we're getting used to the structure of the class, that I think we can move forward without that meeting. Initially, we're going to meet on October 28th. So if you very much want to meet, we can. So contact me along those lines as well. Okay? See you then. Bye.